Saving a dog from a shelter can make lots of people happy and thankful. But sometimes, we don't know what tough things the dog went through before finding a new home. You promise to keep your lovely pet safe in your arms, but it can be challenging to do that. Unfortunately, June Roundtree couldn't stop her rescue dog from running away. Even though she tried, she was really sad and thought she might never see her dog again. June has been working as a cashier at a Walmart in Alabama for a long time. She goes to work every day and looks forward to coming home to her husband and her rescue dog, Abby. But one day, when June came home on November 8, 2020, Abby wasn't there. She searched for her in the backyard and found Abby's collar and leash still attached to a stake in the ground. June felt really sad and thought, how did this happen? It was like a terrible nightmare. She and her hubby immediately hopped in the car. The couple drove in panicky circles around the neighborhood, keeping their teary eyes peeled while calling out for Abby. They did this for many nights to no avail. It felt as if they'd lost a family member, because they did. They frantically reached out to neighbors and contacted local animal shelters, detailing everything about their lab pit bull mix. Weeks went by with no good news, and hope started to fade, leaving June with an empty pit at the bottom of her stomach. Still, she put on her uniform and went to work each day, ready to tackle the daily chaos that consumes Walmart. But there was a different variety of chaos that riled Walmart up on November 28th. While June was holding her own at register number 6 during her regular shift, a sudden commotion by the ice machine caught her attention. She looked up to see her coworkers running around the aisles like madmen. She was puzzled at first, but after a second, something clicked. I said it can't be, June recalled of the moment. A Walmart customer service associate and June's coworker, Danielle Robinette, also shared a few words. I was like, what in the world is happening? Danielle stated, so what did happen? What was all the racket about? Well, there was a medium-sized mutt running around the store. I'm a huge animal lover, so I just followed her. And she ran up to register number 6, Danielle continued. And as we know, register number 6 was run by June. She squinted her eyes as this mangy mutt looked an awful lot like her missing Abby. As the familiar pooch approached the register, June called the name Abby, just hoping that this mysterious pup was her missing girl. The excited dog came up to June, which left her wide-eyed but still suspicious. She didn't want to get her hopes up. June promptly checked the mystery dog's coat, spotting a notable patch of short white fur that surrounded her snout and neck, a patch that June knew all too well. It was Abby. I bent over and hugged her. I completely lost it then. I couldn't speak. I was in complete shock and just couldn't believe it, June gushed. She held Abby in a warm embrace for several minutes, which made the other staff members who were circling them cock their heads in confusion. She looked up with tears streaming down her face and said, "This is Abby." "She's been missing for 3 weeks," Danielle said. I was just floored. But how did Abby find June at the exact Walmart she worked at? See, the Walmart where June worked was located just 1.5 miles from her home, and though Abby had never been inside the store, June would walk her in its parking lot and in the woods behind the store a handful of times. Could Abby have remembered the path June took her on? How she knew I worked there, I do not know, June confessed. Well, according to Clive Wynn, a psychology professor, author, and the director of Arizona State University's Canine Science Collaboratory, she might not have known that June would be in the Walmart, but she probably recognized the building. I suspect that the dog was roaming around somewhere at random until it stumbled upon a familiar location. I think it is perfectly plausible and very likely that this dog was distressed and upset, trying to find home, Clive stated. A dog's navigation isn't perfect, but it does recognize certain important large landmarks. And considering Abby returned with a considerable amount of meat on her bones, June believes someone must have been caring for Abby throughout her 3-week period away from home. I want to thank whoever she came upon that gave her something to eat, she said with gratitude. We kidded at work that she must have known the weather was going to turn and wanted to find her way back so she could have her warm bed, June said with a giggle. Clearly at ease with her fur baby finally safe at home, she added, "It's like a dream. You can't make this stuff up." June Roundtree called Abby a very loving dog, but not one that wants to lick and kiss all over your face. She is more laid back, but she wants to be with you. We can only imagine what it's like to lose a cherished pet for 3 weeks, but what if it was 4 years? June couldn't wrap her head around that, but another pet owner knew it all too well. Michelle Wright was really sad when her dear cat, Fuzzy, ran away from her friend's house. She looked everywhere in her town in New Hampshire for many weeks in July 2010, hoping to find her furry friend. Michelle didn't give up looking for Fuzzy until one of her neighbors told her something that made her feel like her search was pointless. One of her friend's neighbors had told me that a cat that resembled him had been struck by a car, which was extremely devastating. Michelle told WMUR-TV News, "I was a mess for quite a while, and I had given up for the most part," Michelle continued. She was filled with resentment for herself, as if she could have done something to stop these events. Picturing innocent Fuzzy deceased was too much for her to handle. And though this was true, there was a part of her that kept faith that Fuzzy was somewhere out there alive. "I was devastated, but I would always keep my eye out for him when I was in the area," Michelle relayed. 4 years later, still no sign of Fuzzy. Michelle and her husband stopped into Barrington's Pet Connection pet supply store. It was there that she was finally met with a sign, and when we say sign, we literally mean what Michelle sensed was Fuzzy's face. See, the Cocheco Valley Humane Society had a section in the store with animals up for adoption, one being a familiar-looking kitty. His name was Molson. Michelle asked for Molson's story. Pet Connection had been fostering him in support of the Dover, New Hampshire shelter for just about a week, a far cry from the 4 years Fuzzy was missing. But really, he had quite the story. See, though Pet Connection was taking care of this Fuzzy look-alike right before Michelle found her way back to him, the poor feline had apparently been bouncing back and forth between families and the shelter for quite a while. The Cocheco Valley Humane Society had rehomed Molson 2 separate times. The first time, he was adopted by a woman, but that living situation only lasted 7 months. Who would dare get rid of that mushy little face? The second time, a family adopted the cat, later returning him when they moved away from the area. But this was an interesting development. His name was changed to Molson by his last owner, Michelle said. She needed to know more about this cat. "I had said to my husband, 'Wow, he looks an awful lot like Fuzzy.' And I asked how old he was, and she said, according to the shelter, he was 4 years old, and at that very moment, I knew," Michelle explained. Michelle was filled with emotions. She was going to prove this cat was her Fuzzy. She was really adamant about it. "Like, that's my cat, I swear. That looks just like my cat. I'm going to have to bring in pictures," recalled Jess Center, the owner of Pet Connection. And then the next day, she brought in pictures, and lo and behold, they matched up. "Everything to paw prints and colors and markings and everything," he continued. It was a perfect match. When Michelle saw the memorable black spot on the bottom of his paw, she couldn't help but get teary-eyed. "I just started bawling. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but I don't care," Michelle exclaimed. Michelle was more than happy to shell out the $85 adoption fee to reclaim her cherished kitty, who she'd been gravely missing for 4 years. The fee also included putting a tiny chip inside Fuzzy, so they could always know who he was. When they finally found each other again, it was a moment full of love. The story of how Michelle first met Fuzzy when he was a kitten was also really special. He came into her life on Valentine's Day, and now he was back in her arms. She felt the same strong connection with Fuzzy as she did on Valentine's Day in 2009 when he was just a little kitten. Fuzzy was finally back home. Michelle said, "If I didn't believe in miracles before, I do now." Whether you believe in miracles or not, you have to admit that Michelle and Fuzzy getting back together is amazing. Some might call it luck, but these things happen more often than you might think.